Sarah Chiles Matthew Ferguson. Welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Thanks so much for having us, Will.
Thank you.
Sarah and Matthew, you bought an auto repair shop in your native Aspen, Colorado, which is a great story in its own right. But there is a lot to your vision that goes beyond this one acquisition. So we're going to hear about both acquisition and vision. Sarah, let's go to you first. A quick background on you, please. And then Matthew, we'll go to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, thanks so much for having us. This is a very cool full circle moment. We learned so much from the podcast. We've interrogated many of the guests, so it's very cool to actually be on here.
Thank you, Sarah.
So yeah, as you alluded to, born and raised in Aspen. My family's been here for 3 generations. This has really been home for a long time. And I fled and went to Southern California. I went to USC for my engineering degrees. I studied aerospace and mechanical engineering for both my bachelor's and master's, which is a kind of funny thing personality-wise. I did a little stint at Boeing and realized very quickly I'm not an engineer necessarily. I love hard problems. I love tech, but was not an engineer by personality. So ended up jumping more to the venture side of things and found an aerospace and defense venture fund in Southern California, which is where I really started to, find what I was passionate about. Really loved venture, loved investing in new ideas. But obviously, I think COVID was like a reorienting time for a lot of people. I actually moved back to Aspen. Living in Los Angeles during a global pandemic was not necessarily my favorite thing, having, been born and raised in the mountains, and moved back and really got to, reorient myself and what I was passionate about. And Matthew and I actually worked together at the venture fund, which he'll start to talk about. But putting pen to paper on a venture career, whether it's starting a startup or working within venture, became less exciting to me. We had many friends and heard the tales of many people having these, tens of millions, if not hundreds of $1 million exits and walking away with just a few $1 million and not much to show for it. So, if you amortize that over the lifespan of a career of a startup, you're only making a couple $100,000 a year, which is what you could make doing a tech job. So at the same time, this ETA kind of vision came into our field, and organically, I was in my hometown where I was reconnecting with a lot of family, friends, small business owners, and they were retiring, and we knew their kids didn't want to take over the business. So it was kind of one of those come to Jesus moments where you're like, wow, I'm questioning the career I already have. This opportunity seems interesting, and I've refound my love for my hometown. And like I
said, Sarah, when you say this opportunity seems interesting, there was a gap there in between you being home and recognizing that buying some of these businesses where the owners' kids didn't want them. What was that epiphany?
The epiphany was a Cody Sanchez podcast, actually. Yeah,
Thank you, Cody, for filling my funnel.
I know, exactly. It's really interesting. Once we heard it, I was on vacation, actually, and I sent it to Matthew, and our brains just didn't turn off after that. Once we realized that opened up our aperture, and then the funnel started to come in of, okay, how do we backflow this deal flow? So that was what kind of kicked it off.
Amazing.
I don't think we even knew that ETA was an option until that podcast. It opened up a floodgate of ideas, and then your podcast really filled in the gaps. We knew it was a possibility by that one, rogue podcast to listen to, but then listening to you, it kind of, like Sarah said, everything was gibberish, and now it's ours. We're fluent in ETA. I've been listening to you for 2 years.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matthew. And let's hear a little bit about your background.
Yeah, totally. So I born and raised in Aspen. I actually wasn't born here. I was born in New York, but I moved here when I was 10 days old. But absolutely loved growing up in the Valley. As a kid, our parents would just on the weekends say, we'll see on Monday, and we'd go out and camp and raft and fish. And so I absolutely loved it here. It was also one of the beautiful things about Aspen is, it's very rural, but you have a very a big urban influence. You have big musicians. You've got the Aspen Ideas Festival, big, the food festival. So there's influence from the city coming here, but you also kind of have the beauty of the outdoors. So always really loved Aspen. Went to school at Dartmouth to be an engineer. I realized, just like Sarah, very quickly that I was never going to be the best engineer. So I kind of pivoted my studies to taking a lot of different engineering classes instead of, focusing on mechanical. I took electrical, I took aerospace, I took biomedical, just to learn the language of engineering. And then I also majored in studio art. I really kind of decided my goal was to learn how things worked and how to build things, but not just build anything, build things that people really want to interact with. So beautiful things. I was going to go and work as a product manager at Google, Facebook, or Uber. And I had a pretty traumatic leg injury playing hockey, and had to graduate 6 months late. So I was came into the workforce 6 months before the next round of product managers started at these big tech companies, which I was pretty bummed about, but ended up being the best thing possible for my career. I ran into Sarah actually over Christmas, and she was working at this aerospace accelerator venture firm, consulting firm. And I thought it sounded really cool. I was a little bit bored. I had 6 months to kill. And I ended up actually working as her intern after being friends since second grade. So worked as her intern for 3 months. And then, we both were working at this aerospace accelerator for about a year and a half. I then, I had my eyes set on doing venture. I loved in venture. You got to talk to interesting founders all the time. You were solving all these different problems. But I realized somewhat quickly that I didn't want to just go directly into that. I wanted to get some operational, experience. So I bounced around a bunch. I worked go-to-market and sales at a German restaurant tech company. I worked strategy and growth for an augmented reality company. And then I most recently worked in the finance department at a long-haul trucking software company. I also did some advising for a deep tech venture firm. But yeah, when we were working in that first job, when we were, 22, 23, Sarah and I had always been friends, but we kind of realized we're both extremely curious people and ambitious people. And we built a Apple Note, with just a ton of different ideas, startups, properties to buy, weird, ventures and everything. And that, list actually was called PTSTM, our plans to steal the moon. We were working in aerospace. It was kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference to a movie. And now, 5-6 years later, because we were always ideating together, we kind of came together and made it a reality with this holding company in Aspen.
How old are the two of you?
Currently, we're both 29.
Great. Okay.
And I think also in our pre-call and whatnot, we are not a couple. We're very good childhood friends. And so it's been fun to navigate this as friends that have known each other our whole lives.
You met in second grade. Did you go all the way through high school together? Same class?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, wow. That's so great.
Yep.
And the Apple Note plan to steal the moon, I didn't know the reference. It's a reference to what exactly?
Despicable Me, actually.
Despicable Me.
We're not huge Despicable Me fans. It just kind of ended up, we were working in aerospace. It was a fun little
space vibes.
Coming back, to now our STM Holdings, we typically keep this secret, but it's Steal the Moon Holdings, and a little bit of that is kind of coming back to Aspen. It's gone through so much change, especially after COVID. The people when we were growing up, were living here. They were the business owners. Both Sarah and I were. Our parents own small businesses here, and then when COVID hit, instead of the big CEOs, the big wealth, private equity people would come out for vacation. Now they're living here because they can with Zoom. And a lot of the soul of the town is kind of degraded a little bit. They're all wonderful people, but just it's pushing a lot of the working class, the small business owners out of town. So it's kind of like, we're stealing back Aspen, this beautiful place that is very aspirational for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting, guys. So you were bound to be partner. You were going to partner in something. So point number one. And then point number two, you had this plan to steal the moon Apple Note, PTSTM, in case the audience missed that, because it sounds like PTSD, which is maybe there's an irony there. PTSTM, that you considered all sorts of possible things. So I think it's just a testament to the draw of ETA, but also ETA in the vision that you have for what you're going to build, that we're going to spend a lot of time on. That this was the winner of that long Apple Note. Pretty.
Yeah, exactly. Once it was in our minds, we couldn't get it out. And also, I think we recognized in each other, like, we have very ambitious friends from college, high school, whatever, but they don't have the same risk tolerance that we do. And so once we recognized that in each other and we realized how much we can push each other, we're like, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we've made over the years so many decks. We made a deck for flipping houses in Denver. We made a deck for raising a venture fund to invest in deep tech. We have so many ideas, and then this one finally was like kind of the culmination of all of those. It had that venture style to it, where you can come in and bring in new ideas and grow something, but also had that hometown feel. It felt really mission driven, and then also just the financials, right? Really healthy businesses here, and the downside is pretty capped or pretty limited, but the upside is huge for us here.
Yeah. Well, let's have a little bit more on Aspen, not the gentrification of Aspen, which we'll also want to hear a little bit more about, although I think you've mostly said it, Matthew. But I've never been to Aspen, but it looms kind of largest as those among the West Coast ski resort towns, the Jacksons, the Breckenridges, the Park Cities. But I feel like Aspen was the original. I could be wrong there. But anyway, so what's the very quick story of Aspen? Why does it kind of loom larger than all the rest? And am I right about that even?
I think so. I think we're a little bit biased being from here. But at the end of the day, Aspen's a town of 7,000 year-round people. It does get up to around 50 to 75,000 at high season. So obviously tourism, is a huge thing here. Aspen is a little bit unique, from the other resorts that you mentioned, in that it was actually founded as a silver mining town, and it produced the most silver in the country for a while in the late 1800s. So Aspen has real history to it that I think a lot of other ski towns are trying to chase and whatnot. Like, our buildings that look historical actually are historical. They're not necessarily facades. It can look a little bit Disneyland-esque, but that's because there is like real history here. And so Aspen went through a major depression for a while, and then the ski industry started. The population of Aspen was much larger when it was a mining town than it is now, actually. So it's really interesting. I think that it has that real history, which is what attracts people to Aspen. It's beautiful. It's idyllic. It's all the things too that you could imagine.
So since we're just on the topic of Aspen, say maybe a little bit more around the gentrification and what you're seeing and the dynamic today that you're kind of injecting yourselves into.
Yeah, I think like Matthew was alluding to, COVID was really the thing that opened Aspen up. I moved from LA back to Aspen, and a lot of people did as well, and started to actually put down roots here. And I think if you haven't lived year round in Aspen before, you're in for an awakening. There are very hard mud seasons and down seasons, and it's a small town at the end of the day. So what happened is a lot of people tried to export their lifestyles of New York, Miami, Los Angeles, San Francisco to Aspen. So a lot of the restaurants started to change hands. I know that people were trying to adjust the school systems and whatnot and make it, have all the benefits of the city in a very small town. And that was when just pricing became unbelievable. You had people that were actually, somewhat private equity backed, or larger restaurant groups come in with real capital that could afford to lose in the short term for longer term gains. So we've seen a lot of that happen. And I think that's what ultimately pushed out a lot of small business, and what made a lot of, like we said, our friends' parents who owned the small businesses just throw their hands up and be like, I can't do this anymore. I can't pay what these restaurant groups can pay. I mean, for a while, the dishwashers were making $50 an hour here. So you can imagine what that does to a community, and the trickle down effects of that, and, what cost of living, what happens to cost of living. And a lot of people working remotely can pay a lot more for rent, and just everything has kind of started to grow.
Yeah. I think, and on that, one thing is, as locals, there's always this kind of local versus tourist, stigma, but we absolutely love the tourists. We love people coming in, and change is inevitable in these towns. It's always going to change. So we're not trying to fight change per se, but, kind of going back to that history, there's a lot of other ski resorts that were built as ski resorts, and they were built as a place, as a vacation destination, whereas Aspen was a town far before skiing really came here. And so part of the charm was you come to Aspen, you don't want to go to the same stores you're going to in LA and New York. You want to come and experience, this local culture. There's all these bars where it was half billionaires, half total ski bums. And it was really fun for both sides. And we've kind of lost that a little bit in this, trying to export the lifestyle and copy paste, things things from New York and LA to Aspen. It's pushed a lot of the blue collar, not even blue collar, but the working class, 30, 40, 50 minutes down the road. So there's a lot less mixing going on, but there's still hope there. There's people still want to be here. That's the reason we're buying businesses here. We're trying to buy businesses and give our friends who want to move back to Colorado a platform to come and build a career here. We'll go into this, I think, next, but for small businesses, it's a very unique ecosystem in that there's basically one of everything. There's one auto shop, there's one roofing company, there's one this and that. So they're mini monopolies with wonderful buyers, wealthy people who at the auto shop, they're going to get their cars fixed up because they have the money to prioritize safety. And also because it's so small, and Sarah and I have been here for so long, we know every investor, every customer, every business owner. So when we're down there, when we're down and working the front desk of the shop, we're hugging 75% of the people that walk in. So it's a great place to run a business for a lot of reasons, financially and just, word travels fast here. But for a long time, nobody was coming in with a local first mindset.
Yeah. I would have thought that Aspen, a lot of the dynamics that you're talking about would have long since happened in Aspen, but I guess the linchpin was or the pivot point in this story was COVID, where the billionaires decided to actually live year round there, as opposed to before they would just be in and out. And so, so changing the school systems, permanently pushing up rents. Yes. And I also assume everything that you just described afflicts to varying degrees other similar towns in the Mountain West, but probably beach towns and so on, places that were, So this is really a microcosm of a larger trend.
I'm sure.
You're seeing it in Hawaii or seeing it, all of
it. Exactly. And those billionaires didn't go home because, of course, COVID, we heard everybody migrating out of the cities, but then there's also been the follow-on story that, well, actually, no, I want to live in the city. Hasn't been somewhat of a retreat from the billionaires? They've stayed put?
They've stayed put. I'm sure there's some attrition, but especially here, if they have kids that are going to the schools here, we went to a public high school with a ski lift from the cafeteria to the mountain. Like, it's pretty hard to step away from that and move back to a suburb. We also do have an airport that has flights to LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Denver, all the time. So it's pretty easy place to get it out of.
Yeah.
They've stayed. I'm sure there's some people who have moved out, but the population has grown for sure.
Fascinating. Okay. So you decide to do this thing. It's now number one on your PTSTM list. How does the search or the thesis or the vision take more well-defined shape?
Yeah, it started pretty organically, like we said, kind of networking with a lot of those family friends that own businesses that we knew were already actually looking for an exit. Whether that was a super formalized process or not, I'm not sure. It was more of a discovery process. And in that discovery process, we did connect with a broker here. There's only a couple in this town. We actually connected with both of them. One, we were never going to do a deal with. That was absolutely clear. And then the second was a very serious, well-seasoned broker who had a great, number of listings and of high quality too. And it was clear that he had done this many times. So we truly looked at every one of his listings, went down the electrical contractor route for a little bit, ended up being too small for us. And actually the auto shop was the second one we looked at with him. Originally, the owner would not sell the real estate separate from the business. And with interest rates where they were, we just couldn't make the math work. So we actually started the diligence of the auto shop in March of 2024, and we didn't close until November 8th of last year too. So it was a long process. I think we had two kind of headwinds against us. One was, yes, that he wouldn't sell the real estate separate from the business, and we were going down the 7A versus 504 route, and just, with interest rates being at 8.5% on the low end of a 504 loan. And we can talk about, we ended up going the 7A route for just the business. We just couldn't make it work for a long time. And the other headwind we had was our age and like being taken seriously and whatnot. And I think just having owned one business now, it's actually kind of a non-issue now. And like Matthew was alluding to earlier too, like people see what we've done with this business. It's like a very good public display and marketing engine of not just Aspen Total Automotive, the business here, but also what he and I are capable of and how we are as business owners. So yeah, that's how we found the business. We put a lot of diligence into it and a lot of kind of negotiation. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Matthew.
No, we negotiated a lot. We negotiated the price down from basically 2.1 million to 1.5.
Well, before we get into the business itself and the terms, because we want to spend time there. I heard you say, Sarah, that the electrical contracting business you entertained initially was too small. So what were some of the criteria, the financial criteria here? And in fact, there were actually a couple other well-defined criteria that you had. So if you'd share those with us.
Yeah, so we had a checklist of 6 items that we went through, and actually we'll talk about this in a little bit. I'm really glad that it was 6 items long, because if we had just chosen one pillar to go for instance, our number one was, is there a second in charge or one of our friends that we can bring into that's an expert in the field to run the business? The auto shop definitely had that. Had we pivoted everything on that, we would have, been dead in the water, because our operator we had pinned to run the shop for the next 15 years ended up leaving after 2 months.
Foreshadowing there.
Foreshadowing. But yeah, we were looking for
fetal foreshadowing.
Yes, yeah. But we were looking for companies primarily between 500 and 2 million in SDE. I think we kind of realized it's definitely been reinforced as we bought a business that buying a little bit bigger is a lot better. If you buy a company that has $200,000 of SDE, it's going to be the same amount of work as something with $1 million of SDE. And if you have 3 employees versus 15, if one leaves, that's a third of your company disappearing. Whereas if you have 15, it's 1/15% or 1/15th, and it doesn't affect the business as much. You have backup. So at first we were looking really small. We were looking at things that would make us each $30,000 a year. We're looking at a couple small businesses before the electrical company, but realized, we were going to commit a lot of time, a lot of effort to this. We might as well go a little bit bigger. And I think we'll even go bigger in the future. So our pillars were essentially, is there a good operator? Financially has a cash flow for a long time? Is it a cornerstone business that if the community lost, it would be really missed? And the kind of on that is, does it have somewhat of a monopoly? We also had, does it have good employees with long tenure? It's somewhat hard to hire here. So that was a big one for us. And then also, is there a lot of modernization we can do? Can we add CRMs? Can we add marketing? Can we modernize the place? And is there, maybe we're buying something at a 3x multiple, but we really view it as a 1.5x multiple, because we can double revenues pretty quickly with just a few levers.
Yeah, great. Let's double click a little bit on those, whatever it was, 4 and 5, or 3 and 4, the local monopoly, or if it went out of business, would the community miss it? Expand on that, please.
Yeah, so for instance, the auto shop, we're the only auto shop within 35 miles of town. There is technically an auto shop across the street, but they just do detailing, they do tires and brakes. Whereas we've got 6 mechanics, 3 B techs, 3 A techs. So we've got mechanics, some of the best mechanics, honestly, in the country. They can build cars from scratch. They can fix anything. We see cars, we see a bunch of, we do 90% of the enterprises in town. So we do a lot of trucks for property manager stuff, but we also do Bentleys and modified Land Rover Defenders, vintage cars. So we're the only people that can do that. The only people who can work on those vintage cars for about an hour and a half drive, or an hour drive. It's also, Aspen's very small, and we're right across from the airport, which is called the Airport Business Center. It's the only space that's zoned as light industrial. And it's fully developed. So if anybody wanted to build another auto shop, they'd have to buy something that already exists, a building, knock it down, build an auto shop. It would just, the prices would be astronomical. So we're really the only game in town, and the only game in town for the foreseeable future. And there's a lot of other companies like that. There's it's not a huge market, so there's not much incentive to come in and start up a new roofing company, new framing company or steel company. So there's kind of one of each. And
especially when these zoning barriers to entry are so high.
Exactly. It's also just it's such a tight knit community. Word travels like wildfire here. We say something to somebody downstairs, and then all of a sudden they talk about it on the pickleball court, and the entire town knows about it. So with that, also, I mean, you kind of get these customers who are going to be your customers, business customers for life. So it's a pretty hard town to break into if you don't have a history.
Yeah, I think Matthew's like getting to a good core part of our thesis in general too, and like why we chose Aspen, why we chose our hometown. It's because we're trying to start this flywheel of invested in by locals, run by locals, whether that's us running, but also like having operators that are local, keeping local business locally owned. And it's really like, I think Naval Ravikant was like a big, motivator for us in venture and whatnot, but playing long-term gains with long-term people, because, this is like, we're long on Aspen for sure. And we know that there are the right people to continue this flywheel. And like Matthew said, it happens organically by just seeing customers down here and whatnot. But that's like the vision that's kind of allowing us to continue to persevere, because there's definitely challenges that we.
And speaking
with that, go ahead, Matthew.
I was going to say, speaking of long-term games, there's that one part where we started work. We have this shop. Our biggest customers are the property managers for any company, any business we work with. We're going to be going through the property managers. So we've built really good relationships, but we've also have been in the part of the community for 29 years. So we're going to have a pretty good head start on those long-term games.
Mm-hmm. Well, your kind of Aspen or bust North Star may kind of neutralize unpacking this, but let's unpack a few things there. Just on the monopoly thing, we like this word, pricing power. On the other hand, when I hear one business in a market, I also hear maybe not a great market, small market. I mean, you guys are former venture investors. it's all about TAM in venture land. You're not playing a venture game, so it's a bit of a non-analogy. But still, it's like, are there not other, you've given barriers to entry reasons why there aren't other roofing businesses or auto body shops, but perhaps also it's just, well, I guess you did just say it, Matthew. It's too small a market, and therefore organic growth is capped. And you might say, well, that's why we're buying multiple businesses. But I think it should be acknowledged that some monopoly can be good. Monopoly is good pricing power, but it also might indicate a very small market. Respond to that.
Yeah. So I'd say kind of two things. I think saying there's just one of everything is a little bit hyperbolic. There's a couple, a couple framing companies, a couple here and there. But there's typically kind of one main player. I think that we do see a lot of growth, right? We're in a small market, but we're in a very powerful market. Our without changing, we haven't upped the prices really. We're not trying to price gouge or anything, but because of our customer here and their willingness to spend on safety on their vehicles, we probably by square foot have one of the highest grossing auto shops in the country. We also are part of a valley that takes about 45 minutes to an hour to drive down, with I think like five towns. So we're kind of spacing our businesses in Aspen, and then either maybe acquiring down valley or expanding down valley. I think one thing that this is obviously longer term, but one idea that I really like is a lot of people are expanding into Aspen. They're coming from New York, Denver, and opening up in Aspen. I'd like to expand out of Aspen, build our centers here, build incredible brands here, and then maybe open up in Vail, maybe open up in Denver, Breckenridge, and expand out where that the financial upside right now is being exported out. People can't live here or build careers here because all the money is going to HQ in Chicago. Whereas if we have HQ here, we can kind of pool money together and allow people to live in a beautiful place. But yeah, it's definitely a smaller market. I will say though, even though it's a tiny town, we're the only auto shop, it's kind of shocking the amount of times I'm on the gondola and people don't know that there's an auto shop here. There's no marketing done for 49 years. So they're driving an hour away to get their cars fixed when they could, for $20 an hour more, do it in Aspen.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts to add on that too. I don't know how to quantify the GDP of Aspen. I'm sure it's a Googleable thing, but to give some sort of analogy here, the annual operating budget of the city of Aspen is $230 million a year, like through taxpayer revenue on mostly real estate, obviously. There is real commerce happening here. I don't know what the per capita is. I think that's about $40,000 a person here. So, that I think is reflective of just the general commerce that happens in this town as well. And then like Matthew was saying too about, a lot of people just not knowing that we exist, the same traits of most boomer businesses where it's low tech or it's, there's not much marketing effort put into it, exists as a theme in Aspen is in general too. It's a very kind of traditional small town thing. So to come back and bring a lot of these tools, I think that's what Matthew was referring to in the beginning of like the uncapped potential that we have too. The reach is really incredible and I think unique to potentially most resort towns, to be honest.
Yeah, because it was somewhat monopolistic, there's not much incentive to change and to update businesses, which is one of the reasons there's so many businesses falling behind. They're great, necessary businesses, but other people are importing much more modern versions of them. So it's actually kind of alpha for us where we can go to these businesses that everybody knows, everybody loves, but just with a few tweaks, we've already seen it in 6 months. We've absolutely blown past our revenue goals just by adding a couple small tweaks that seem like common sense. But when you're running a business for 49 years, this business was run for, I think 43 years by one owner, transitioned for 5 years, and then we bought it. But you kind of get into your rhythm and don't update things.
Sure. Well, we're going to sink our teeth into what these levers pulled have been. I'll also just say, and we talked about this on the pre-call, the Chenmark idea of a tackle shop. And for the audience, that is imagine a fishing hole somewhere and at the end of a dirt road, and there's a tackle shop there that serves all the people who go down there to fish. And very small market, but a total monopoly and an annuity business. The people keep coming and they keep have to and keep using that one tackle shop year in, year out. And so it's just as steady and reliable and protected, its market position protected as can be. It's not going to be a growth story, but it's going to be a forever story. And I love that framing. And that's, of course, one that often gets lost, which is why Chenmark talks about it, because so often yours truly, are just growth. It's a fixation on growth. And not all businesses have to be growth, like super growthy stories. And in fact, I feel like a lot of your targets here could be tackle shoppy type stories.
I think we're operating very similarly to Chenmark in that we have such a long-term vision and time horizon here that we don't really care about the short-term, gains and whatnot. And so everything we're doing here, whether it's investing in more CapEx or more personnel or whatnot, is because we see a larger vision and our time horizon is much more extended.
Yeah, I think, even like you said, permanent. I think we see ourselves as permanent capital. We're not coming in here for 2-3 years, pulling all these levers and selling it for some crazy multiple. I think we see our on a business by business exit as starting to sell back some equity to our key employees. We want our guys at our front desk, our presidents, our shop managers to have equity, and the idea of them putting their kids through college through the auto shop is the most exciting thing for me. That's kind of how we were raised. So we are permanent capital, and we're excited about the growth right now, not because we want a hockey stick growth. We're capped by square footage here. But we are excited to get it to its highest potential, grow it to where it should be operating at max efficiency, and then just putting it on autopilot and letting it do that for the next 20-30 years. And then our kind of personal growth comes from doing that a bunch of times, putting it together in a holding company, allocating capital back to certain places, and using the holding company engine as a long road trip, right? Instead of just a quick sprint race.
Such a cool vision. I love it. Anybody else that from this ecosystem that you were inspirations or that you followed? We've talked about Chenmark.
Yeah, I think all the classics, like Brent Beshore was a really good model for us. We loved like Tiny as well. I think just the Holdco model. became really compelling to us. And then, you know, I know there's a gentleman in Park City too. And so like bringing that local aspect back is important. Having you know, some element of altruism in it as well.
Yeah. There's also, this is just one kind of random thing to touch on, but when you're talking about the tactile shop, I think that, and kind of going back to also this phenomenon of gentrification happening in a lot of other places, our primary focus by far is Aspen, and then kind of growing out slowly from Aspen. But I think we're also open, and we've thought about the idea of, if we know somebody who's lived in Jackson Hole forever, who's really ambitious, or somebody who's lived in Kauai for their entire lives and wants to do this, like we would love to kind of help support that and build this kind of protecting these local jewels all around the country. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Jackson, you mentioned Hawaii or Kauai, but and those are resort towns. So you're thinking in kind of a resort town framework. But this probably the core dynamics here probably relate to almost anywhere that for whatever reason is kind of turning over, small town and local businesses are going away, which of course is, you know, it's a story as old as Walmart, right? But maybe there's a new generation, there's an interest in ETA, there are COVID dynamics. And so this is a moment in time where young people can come in and build something from that churn or from that threat. But the point is, it doesn't necessarily have to be a resort town, but maybe that's where the dynamics are most acute.
Exactly. And I think that we just kind of default to going to resort towns because that's what we know. We know best. Yeah. There's a lot of weird nuances in resort towns and seasonal turnover and everything that we've learned to deal with and are well accustomed to from growing up in one. But yeah, we're open to going anywhere.
You got to like living in a small town. You've made it very clear that you like living in Aspen. But this thing about, you guys are on a stage. There is now a spotlight on you. You say something. I mean, probably, you know, the guy who runs the general store already knows that you're sitting in a podcast interview right now.
Yeah.
No, but it's kind of like you are putting yourselves out there. And the louder you talk about how this is kind of a pro-Aspen thing, and I don't doubt your intentions, but the more you're going to be held to that, and the community is going to be invested in your success. I'm reminded a little bit of, I did an interview last week with Christine Traylor, who bought Swan House, a gorgeous bed and breakfast right in the DuPont Circle neighborhood of Washington, D.C. And the neighborhood really knows this property and cares about this property, and expresses opinions about what she does with this property. And so there's a little bit in these business, when we all like getting away from the impersonalness of big business to the real personalness of small business. But it also does come with the community sometimes not recognizing boundaries, not respecting boundaries, and feeling like they have a vote in what you do. Is that just the price of admission to playing this game?
Oh yeah. If you don't think we hear something every day about how Aspen's changing and all prices, and it's going to be a constant here. And so that's just a pill we had to swallow from the beginning, knowing that there will always be criticism. The only thing constant in Aspen is change and locals complaining about it. And I think that it's interesting. I mean, we are the first of our generation doing this. And I think we have, you know, real reason to be doing it because we earned our chops. We were born and raised here. Our family's been here forever. And so I think it's, at the end of the day, we're trying to create the Aspen of our generation or of our kids' generation and just building what we think that ought to be, but with like a real local flavor to it.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, it's not like we're peacocking saying, oh, we care about this community. We genuinely love it here. We love the people. And yeah, it's every dinner party somebody's saying, oh, you should do this. You should do this. So what about this? And you just kind of, it just kind of comes with the territory. I think also, but on that also, right, before we were doing this, we were talking a big game and everybody was joking like, oh, you should buy my business someday. And now those jokes are not jokes. After, you know, we get so much feedback about how well the shop is running right now and the team we've established here. And we've gained local trust. So I think it goes a long way. You know, we were living in LA before this for about 5-6 years and thinking about doing it there, but we could absolutely do it there. But just, you know, the upside of if this first auto shop went really poorly, then it would be really, really, really hard for us to do a second job. But we just kind of backed ourselves and hoping that domino effects.
Back yourselves into a corner of performance. Is that what you were going to say? I'm actually reminded of Naval Ravikant again. One of his little aphorisms is about what is it? It's something about like being the personal brand. So often, I'm not getting it right, but it's a good one, and it's really traveled, it really impacted me. Where so often business people are trying to create businesses that are, and we talk about it here, that can run on their own, that aren't tied to the personal brand of the protagonist, of the founder. And he's like, no, lean into your own. The strongest brands, the Oprahs, the Donald Trumps, the whomever, they have completely leaned into their brand, and their brand is the business. That's not something to run away from. That's something to embrace. And so it's a little bit like what you're doing.
Yeah. The question, our challenge now is how do we do that at scale and multiply ourselves across every business and still feel like, we don't not necessarily want our faces on it, but at the end of the day, like we are kind of what's selling too in this town.
Right.
So
right.
We'll see.
I think the dream is, if we buy, eventually, if news breaks that we buy another company, the town's excited and they're expecting this kind of step up in customer experience and branding and everything. But I think that you also tie it where we have somebody at the auto shop where there is a face or two at the auto shop where people just absolutely love and trust that person. And they think that they're really the owners, and hopefully they are, but we give them equity. And at each place, we kind of have one operator that's really a face of the business, but then everybody knows it's associated with us. So they're kind of twofold. But it is, it goes back to branding. Nobody was really caring about branding in Aspen before. I think one other, while we're just talking about quotes, there's a long-term game, playing long-term games with long-term people. There's the personal brand. And this isn't Naval, but kind of in the same thing. And going back to our mission is, I honestly don't know if it was Josh Wolf, the VC, who said this, or Abraham Lincoln. I don't know. It's all over the place. There's all these different variants of it, but it's the best way to predict the future is to build it. And we really have this vision for our friends who are, successful, ambitious, eventually having kids and moving out here. And so we're trying to build this place that we see being a beautiful place to live and raise kids in. We have a vision for Aspen and we want to be really proactive about that.
Fantastic, guys. How exciting. All right. Let's get to the business without further ado.
Beaten that in.
Let's hear about it. So tell us all about the business, please, including numbers if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, it's not worth going into. The real estate separate from the business. Eventually we wore him down enough to the point where he would sell us just the business.
But actually, Sarah, please, why was that so important to you? Why did you not want the real estate? Because it's been an education for me that people will say, you're not in the real estate business. You're in the whatever it is. You're in your case, the auto repair business. So if you own valuable real estate in your business, you're acting as if that's the optimal use of your resources. Because if not, you should sell it and deploy that capital into things that in the business that you know. On the other hand, first of all, that alone is a debate. But particularly in your case, where there's so little real estate to go around, it's even more strategic in your case to own real estate where it's so scarce. So say more about this decision to just really, really, really not want to buy the real estate.
Don't get me wrong. We definitely wanted to. It was a factor of interest rates, down payment and all of those things. Bearing in mind, yes, we are in Aspen. We are paying Aspen real estate prices. So it's a 5,000 square foot auto shop and he wanted at least $5 million for it. And since we bought the business, it is now listed at 5.8. So yeah, it's a huge number. It's a huge thing to tackle in general. And we just couldn't make the math work with what we wanted to raise, the amount of equity we wanted to retain and all of those things. So yeah, ultimately we just couldn't make it work at the end of the day. It's a true matter of math.
Yeah.
We do have we would have absolutely had to try to buy the real estate. We have a really great 20-year lease here. And eventually we would, if we can kind of get to the right price, we'd absolutely buy the real estate. I think there's a lot of advantages to it. But then at the same time, if we don't, like you said, that capital, instead of putting into an asset that'll pay you back every 10, 15 years, we're making our money back in 1 to 3 years on the businesses we're buying. So
yeah, just going into it, we had an advisor who kind of we serendipitously met, and he ended up being an investor in the shop. But he very objectively put it: would you rather make $500K on a $1.5 million asset or $300K on a $5 million asset? It's not, when you put it that objectively, obviously there's some work into business ownership, but if we can really do what we say we're going to do and implement these systems and make the business relatively hands off, then yeah, we take that all day.
I think also this kind of alludes to the next point of how we actually ended up doing the deal, the finances and everything. But we also, I had been working in for tech companies for the past since college, and kind of somewhat break even salary, and all of my net worth is in kind of long-term equity there. So, and same thing with Sarah. So we didn't have the capital just to put down a down payment because we wanted to. We also, didn't have money from our families really. My dad gave me $10K to help with some lawyer fees at the beginning. That was really it. As an investor, but we didn't have just the money in our bank to take a shot on the real estate. We had to be really targeted with where we were deploying our capital, and then also where we were leveraging ourselves.
Yeah. Did you guys entertain a sale leaseback? I'm curious.
We did. I think it was important for us. I mean, really the vision was like, okay, we'll buy the business, we'll stack, some cash in the next 2 to 3 years and buy the real estate. And we're hoping that plays out. We didn't think that the former business owner would list the property, publicly, which it is now. We have photographers coming today, unfortunately, for them to list it. But I think that at the end of the day, he's asking too much, and we're going to stick to our guns and say, this is what we think it's worth, and give us a call when inevitably you don't sell it.
So you considered a sale leaseback and then didn't pursue that very far because ultimately you do want to own the real estate. The numbers of the business, please.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was originally, we got the purchase price down from 2.1 to about 1.5, which was a 3x multiple. It was making about 500,000 in SDE pretty consistently. It was actually like 475,000, but roughly 500. And since then we've only had it for 6 months, but we're definitely on track to substantially increase those SDE and revenue numbers. It does 2.6 in top line revenue. I think we're well on track to go a few 100,000 past 3 million this year.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we bought it at 1.5, but we raised money at a 1.72 million project cost. That include working capital, closing costs, etc.
How much working capital did you put down?
I actually think this is important to double click on because I know that we were trying to, we listened to Acquiring Minds episodes to get as much out of it, and maybe there's a gap here. We didn't know how to structure. We did a very self-funded search, so we raised 20% at a 1.5x step up. So we ended up selling, $450,000 worth of equity, which I think is pretty favorable for us. Actually, we had a pretty tight investor pool. I know that a lot of funds and whatnot are expecting the 2x equity step up. So for those who don't know, a multiplier on the equity that's put in by investors. We worked with Kristen from Exos, now Port 51, and they were great at helping us structure things and the amount of working capital we should put in. We ended up getting $135K worth of working capital on it, which, in hindsight, thank God we bought the business when we did, which is at a super high season. But we went straight after that into 3 months of true money losing months. So we're learning the seasonality. We got super lucky. We haven't touched our working capital. But if that was mistimed, it's very important to have some real reserves there for sure, and to be able to ride out, that seasonality that we're talking about in resort towns. And also a shout out to Matthias too. We used him as the loan broker who introduced us to Kristen, which was an awesome experience. We loved our team so much.
Yeah. We had one call with Matthias. We talked to so many banks and we didn't have the net worth at all. Nobody locally understood it. Us now, I think they do. Now that we've done this once, but talked to Matthias and he kind of gave us a few pointers on how to structure everything, and then introduced us to Kristen, who has a daughter who snowboards, and they compete in Aspen, so there's an immediate connection there, and they were just wonderful. We also, we work with Apple Tree for our accounting. They're wonderful.
SMB
law.
for the acquisition.
Yeah.
So we kind of did the cookie cutter one, but it ended up working out great for us.
Great. Super, guys. And that's Matthias Smith, the loan broker who introduced you to the ultimate lender that you used.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So let's hear how did it go once you got into the business?
Yeah.
Let's hear about the transition.
It was obviously younger people stepping into a blue collar workforce. So we were pretty scared to death on day one, to be honest. We spent a lot of time over preparing and how are we going to, show our personalities and show that we care and whatnot. And I think that you can't prepare for that, to be honest. It was intimidating. And the way that I think we ultimately, were able to make it through that is just showing up every day, being the first ones there, the last ones to leave, getting to know the guys. Everybody has their own personalities and what's important to them. And it's not necessarily, making the most money. It might be getting acknowledged for the work they put in. This is a very skilled trade, obviously. And so if you're not getting the recognition for your skill level, I think that can start to wear on guys as well. Yeah. And I remember distinctly, I think I was driving to work listening to an Acquiring Minds episode. And I think this was probably in December, maybe early January, and just being like, you know what? I don't think we're going to have a fetal position moment. I think we're good. And I think maybe one thing we didn't touch on was that there was a strong operator who had been here for 6 years. He was really the face of the business. And that was one of the main motivating factors for buying the business. We're like, no problem. Matthew will keep his tech job, which we didn't talk about. I'll kind of work part-time, but really we've got this guy. And so
so your plan was to do this as a side thing.
Yeah, it was going to be, our main thing, but so we could keep as much money in the business as possible, reinvested. I was going to keep a tech job that was partially remote in San Diego. I was going to be back and forth. Sarah was going to take the full salary because she was living here full time. And the goal was to do that so we could keep as much money in the bank so we could do acquisition number 2 as quickly as possible. A lot of things happened. Now we're both full-time here. And honestly, could not be happier with that. I think doing it part-time, it didn't feel right. I think we both wanted to back ourselves. And there was a lot of kind of not miscommunication, but Sarah was here every single day. I was in and out, and we're equal partners and I wasn't showing up equally. And so I guess we'll kind of go into the field position moment, but we had, everything seemed perfect. And then we had this, oh shoot. And it was really scary, but it allowed us to really reshape the business kind of in the image we wanted it to be reshaped. It was kind of, eventually we were going to kind of creep towards this goal of how we wanted the shop to look like, but we were forced to just kind of do it ourselves. We went from having an operator and not really knowing much about the business to running it purely by ourselves for a few months. And now we have an absolutely incredible team. We've changed some positions around. We're both here full time. A lot has changed.
Yeah.
So maybe continue with the nitty gritty of this story of what happened here.
Yeah. So things were great for a while. Obviously, guys, as they hit the end of the year, have some accumulated vacation, and so our operator asked to have 2 weeks off. He's a service advisor, mainly kind of front of house, face of the business guy, and he had run the business for 6 years and had allowed the former owner to be mostly hands off, and it was great. And we thought he had an employment contract and he wanted to stay and all of those things. He took 2 weeks off during Christmas, at which point Matthew and I were the only ones, and we had to jump in and kind of attempt to field people's questions about their cars and whatnot. And, we did the best we could at a pretty busy time still. When he came back from the holidays, something had completely flipped, and who knows what it actually was. I think a personality of a business will always change when there's ownership change. But at the end of the day, he had 2 young ones, 2 and 6, and he commuted over an hour every day. He didn't see them throughout the week. That was the reason we were told. And he ended up leaving. So that was that was when I didn't sleep for 48 hours. We stepped into an industry that, while it has a simple business model of, we're a factory of parts and labor, and that's it. And, this is what's wrong with your car. We'll fix it and it'll go. There is a lot of nuance to knowing and interacting with customers and explaining what's wrong and being the middleman between the mechanics and the customer at the end of the day. So steep learning curve for us. This is also a complex system that we run with the lifts and the amount of inventory and all of those things. And so it was quite a transition. He did give us 3 weeks, which was nice. And we ended up hiring some great guys and we made it through. But I think that we spoke with Adam Markley, who, obviously is a guest of the show and whatnot. And I think that this is not an uncommon thing in businesses. And I think that, like Matthew said, you can't hang your hat on one trait of a business. Those 6 things that we outlined have to be present going forward too. And potentially it was meant to be. I think that, we have enough distance from it now to be like, okay, we made it through, and, it's probably for the better.
Yeah. I think one thing also is, it's a very common theme, and this is maybe a hot take, but everybody says, for the first 6 to 12 months, you shouldn't do anything with the business, let it run. And we heard that, and we wanted to make a couple small tweaks because there was just some low hanging fruit that wasn't going to change much. We have changed just about everything now, and it has been. But we've just communicated with the team. We're extremely transparent about everything. Ask them about the pros and cons of switching, and if they have any ideas, they come to us, so we implement them. I think having that previous operator, he was the spoke. Everything went through him. Without him, the business couldn't run. And you tear that out, everything kind of crumbles. So we were able to kind of give everybody a little bit more, ownership over their particular role, and build a system where if anybody's sick, anybody's out, this business is still going. It's all system based. Everything can be picked up. Everything's tracked. Everything. And I think the guys feel really good about it. We've had some internal feedback that people just feel better here than they ever have. It's really like we were intimidated coming in, working with these mechanics, and they are family now. Like, we absolutely love these guys. They're the most interesting, the smartest people in the world. They're total geniuses, and just good guys. But we also, basically the whole thing was kicked out from underneath us, and because we were able to build it back up, we feel really good about it. We found 2 guys. The way that the hiring had worked is there was 2 people up front. We had the main operator who knew everything, and then they just kind of hired somebody who wanted work. They didn't know anything about cars, but they were kind of a warm body to pick up phones and stuff. And we've gone back and hired 2 people who have extensive auto experience. They went to school to run auto shops. They worked at the local racetrack. They're really good friends. They're young, they're hungry. They, one just got married out here and wants to be in the Valley for a long time. So we hired 2 people. It's a little bit more expensive than the old model, but they're 2 people that really know what they're doing and want to take ownership of the shop. And they're, really great people.
Well, going back to small town culture, that is probably a feature of small town culture, that there's this, because everybody knows everybody else, there's this trust fabric in the community, that whereas in an impersonal big city, you don't have that. So there's sort of self-policing that goes on of good behavior.
Exactly. And that also goes back to how we run our business, right? I mean, before owning an auto shop, I avoided, auto shops like the plague. I didn't know what I was being charged for. I didn't know how much they're marking anything up. So we, especially being in a small town and not, being in an independent auto shop, we tell the guys up front to be extremely transparent about what a car really needs, what would be a nice to have, what would be maintenance, and what, would almost be a novelty just to get it back to, mint condition. We have to operate all of our businesses, this one and everything in the future, with pure transparency. I think that's going to go a long way. Maybe we probably could price gouge a lot more than we are, but we'd rather just have a business that the community feels safe walking into every day. So.
What did Adam Markley say when you called him in this crisis, when the operator quit on you?
We actually had met Adam after the fact. And he was like, oh yeah, like it happens to all of us. And we're like, oh my God, that was the most terrifying thing that had ever happened in my life. And he's like, yeah. So surrounding yourself with, people that have that kind of wisdom, I think is very helpful. But on that note too, I think something unique to auto repair and potentially other industries, I haven't done my research, is that there are these coaching groups too. We're a part of one called Shop Fix Academy. And I think that if we
Fix Academy.
Yeah, exactly. I think if we didn't have that, the reaction would have been a lot different, because we had a coach to call immediately, same night, and be like, oh my God, this is terrifying. And they were like, it's okay. It's a large salary off the balance sheet. You'll find someone new. And obviously we had to let that advice kind of sink in. But having, a part of this coaching group is standardized kind of P&L structures and structuring front of house, the weight in front of house versus back of house. And I think we've learned so much, and that the way the business is run was so dependent on that one person, and to replace him would be nearly impossible. So we have to, like Matthew said, build a system and a weighted system here that just allows the shop to run and everybody feels like they're kind of contributing equally.
Yeah. And ShopFix is incredible. I think, in the same way that as business buyers, we can listen to Acquiring Minds and find people talking about the problems that we're facing. Yeah. When we first joined, we went out to Tennessee for a week to train with a bunch of the best auto operators in the country. It was awesome. And now basically the way it works is we have a coaching call every week. We have a coach who runs a couple auto shops in Kansas. And that's really helpful. But then we also have a tribe where we every week, it's optional, but it's between 5 and 20 shop owners that join a Zoom call and just talk about their day-to-day and things they're going through. And that community has saved us so many times. And also people tell us stories and like, oh, there's no way that'll ever happen to us. And then it does. And we're equipped to deal with it. And we go back, and so I think that no matter what industry you're working in, investing in the community and really immersing yourself in that world is important.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's an exportable lesson, but I hope that it would be in the next industry we buy in, like to have local community, but then also other owners of similar business types where it's kind of rinse and repeat of the same issues that come up.
Well, I think it is a great point. And I think searchers can ask themselves, does my industry or this industry where this target exists have some sort of training or industry association training thing that is really established and, that I can get plugged into, like just by, signing up? HVAC, plumbing, electrical has Nexstar is a big one that I've heard of, and I hear people cite. So I think it's more the exception than the rule.
Yeah.
But of course, this also is essentially what we're talking about here is, well, I was going to say peer groups. It's much more formal than that. Peer groups aren't formalized generally, don't have training. But peer groups can also be very helpful in the same way. And there's a lot of efforts in Searchland to do peer groups. Often it's searchers across different industries having a peer group. And so you don't get the benefit of like industry specific knowledge, which is an enormous benefit. But one thing that an early guest, Cassie Niekamp, did, who bought a small fencing business, is she basically created her own peer group of other fencing owners. So she went to like an industry conference and she just invited them all to get on a regular Zoom call. So not local to her, who would have been competition, but other folks that she met at a conference, and that was immensely valuable. So you can jerry rig the kind of the benefit here if it doesn't already exist. But what a hack! What a shortcut!
Oh my gosh, it expedited our timeline so much, and to be honest, like the respect that it allowed us to kind of tip the scales where we were the ones in charge. For so long, we were like, please give us your respect and we'll show that we're working so hard and whatnot. But once we had formalized knowledge too on how to run a shop, the authority that it gave us pretty quickly was unbelievable. And the guys also respected that we were doing that and we were going to Tennessee and we really cared about the business and what we were learning and bringing those lessons back.
It went a long way. And, a lot of them have come from, one of our mechanics was a professor at a technical school for a long time. He's worked at all these different shops. All of our guys worked at dealerships, worked at, some of the best auto shops in Texas and around the world. And once we kind of came back with that language, it really unlocked so much. It was so much more collaborative, whereas we were just kind of reacting to everything. And now we're very proactive, on the offensive of how to make this place a better business.
Yeah.
We were saying things that, we were giving them permission to do things that are industry standards that they just were never verbally told they could do. I mean, small things that, before we ran the shop, it was almost entirely reactive. If something was broken, a car would come in, they'd fix the broken thing and send it back out. Whereas now we do inspections on everything. If a car is in here, we're going to look at its brakes, its oil, its power steering, it's everything. And not just to upsell the customer, but so that the customer knows exactly the state of their vehicle, and they don't have questions, and we're preventing them from coming in. And instead of, maybe they spend $500 doing some maintenance, but it's going to save them from a $4,000 expense when the whole thing blows up. And that's something that most shops do. But this shop started with a local mechanic who just built a shop over 40 years and was just a mechanic, and had other people who were mechanically savvy come in and out. And then it was bought by a really awesome guy who had retired from Wall Street, really liked cars, and kind of bought this as a fun side project. And he did a lot of great things for the actual financials of the business and standardizing some of that. But in terms of
the customer experience,
or how the mechanics work and the systems that they're going through, there wasn't much change there. So leaning into the education is important for us. And I think it's something we've learned a lot going forward. If we buy into a new industry, I think, if we buy another company, we always want to spend time here. We're going to want to spend time there, but I think we are really going to invest heavily in the beginning of understanding the nuances of that specific industry so that we can speak the language to our operators, to our employees.
We still got a ways to go, guys, and we're deep in. But just before we leave this fetal moment with the exit of your operator, and so come to find out that all roads pass through this operator, which was a fragile design of the business anyway. And so that's big part of why this has been a blessing, and that was a blessing in disguise, because not only did culture improve later, but so too did the structure. And so it's now there's not as much key man risk. And so I guess the lesson there is over-reliance on a single operator is a weakness.
Yeah, and by the way, I loved the first few months of business ownership, and I was so invigorated and whatnot, but I would go home at the end of the day and be like, if he leaves, what will we do? And I, like, at the end of the day... And then he did. Yes, at the end of the day, I still had a pit in my stomach always. And so, I think that it was, again, a blessing in disguise, but like, it was kind of meant to be that it would happen, because I needed to just alleviate that fear of him everything, right? And just wipe it clean slate, build the systems that we want, because I wouldn't be able to get that bug out of my head otherwise.
Yeah. I felt like before that, it was almost like, we had caught a fish or like lassoed the cattle were holding on for dear life. We had it. We were like, how do we keep them? We talked all the time, like, oh, should we give them equity today? When should we do this? Like, let's figure out how to really lock him down. And then when he left, I feel like now we're riding the horse. We've got control, and no matter what happens, it's under we will mess up and things will go wrong, but at least we kind of understand why they went wrong, and we have a deep understanding of the business. And that call, we always talked about it of what if he left, and we're so lucky we have him. And then she called me. I was actually out of town for the weekend, and I will never forget her being, so he left.
This is the call that we dreaded. Came in this morning. Wow.
Yeah.
Any other improvements to the business that we've heard? Of course, what we just talked about, that now the management layer and how that is better. That kind of best practice of doing kind of a spot check of every vehicle that comes through and offering to solve problems that the customer didn't necessarily ask for. What else? Modernization. We haven't talked about that at all, and that was one of your key criteria.
Yeah, there's so many. I think, like you said, so inspections were huge. There's kind of two ways we can improve the business. It's either customer facing or internal. On the customer side, small things like marketing. We started doing text blasts when we were having slow weeks, and it has one text blast that costs us $100 will yield over $100,000 of sales for us. And it's small things like, hey, we're doing a little thing, or hey, we're doing usually it's $200. We're going to give you $75 to look at a 44-point inspection with pictures of everything of your vehicle, and people are like, wow, that's a great deal. Now we have a list of 44 things that we can go back and say, hey, you need to get this done. So marketing, we're about to, there's a lot of people who say don't spend all your money on branding right away. We haven't launched our new website yet or branding, but we've done it's in the next 3 weeks, we're going to launch a huge branding overhaul. new website where you can book online, Instagram. We're going to have really great branded loaner cars. Right now we have a 2001 Jeep Grand Cherokee with a check engine light on that people are giving us an Aston Martin. We're giving this like janky vehicle. So, improving just you come to a world-class auto shop, you want to have a good experience. We also, we send the inspections, we take pictures of everything so people don't think we're just back there, saying, oh, this person's got a nice car, let's ask them to spend a lot of money on us. So actually, we kind of celebrate if their car is great and we don't have to do anything. So really in improving that customer experience. And then internally, we're full, like we said, we're fully staffed. We're not working or dependent on one person up front. We have two people who really know cars and can explain to people in layman's terms what's going on with their vehicle. We have like a whole new kind of red, yellow, green light system where red light, you need to do this to get it safe. Yellow light, this is what I do if this is my wife's car. Green light, this is okay. If you really want to fix it, we'll fix it for you. But we still have a lot of stuff to change. We're actually changing our CRM in 2 weeks after it took forever to implement our first one. Just because there'll be some huge unlocks where right now the tech space, they do tons of work. They give a piece of paper up to the guys up front who are in charge of doing sales, talking to customers, picking up phones, scheduling, but then also looking at these estimate or at these write-ups and spending an hour or two building an estimate of what work needs to be done, the labor hours, the parts they need to order, where they're going to order them from, how they can get them cheapest. And it's a huge task. So we're kind of splitting that work going forward with the mechanics who know the part number because they were just holding it in their hand. And allowing the guys up front to really, polish it and then spend most of their time making sure that we're being efficient, getting people in and out as fast as possible, educating people as to why they're, why they're doing what they're doing. And then also, just really small things. Like we have one phone system where everything goes to every phone. If we just add a simple press 1 to schedule, press 2 to talk about an ongoing job, they go to our service writers. We're hiring a parts assistant that can help with scheduling. And it instead of people code switching all the time, we've given people very specific tasks to do, and it's just increased efficiency a lot.
There's the engineers talking. Finally, we were using our engineering degrees for systems. Yeah, I think that what is important is that we have been here every day and we can make these changes. And like Matthew said, like switching phone systems might be a minor thing, but we realize like how much that's going to pay off. And these are small tweaks, but it's part of creating that well-oiled machine, no pun intended, because we're at an auto shop. But really just small things, whether it's customer facing or internal, it's just small little tweaks that, really do end up paying off at the end of the day. We're 6 months into it and now we're just being able to go do these improvements that we thought we would do, from day one. But we had to work to get to the point where the team feels comfortable with their workload to be able to, be the business owners and do business development and a lot more of those things.
There's also, even internally, something as small as, week one, we sat down with every single person individually and said, what's your goal? What do you, you'd think that everybody wants to maybe make more money, have more free time, but everybody has something different. And we really try to cater their work style and workload to that. You've got some of the master mechanics who want more responsibility. They want to be able to, if they see something wrong in the back of the shop, have a system to come to us and say, hey, we need this tool or we need to change this, or can I train the B techs to do this so I don't have to do it? It's not the best use of my time. And so there's one mechanic in particular who really stepped up to the plate. Coming into it, we were kind of warned that there was this one kind of grumpy old mechanic who was going to be a problem, and we kind of went in there and we're really just listened to him and we're curious about what he was doing, and he has totally shifted. He's an absolute joy to be around. We've promoted him to shop manager. He helps us with ordering stuff for the back, new systems, everything. But so there's guys like that who want more responsibility. They want to. They've trained for this their entire lives. They want to be recognized for that. He went and got his certification again. We're going to frame it and put it in the front office. Like, this is an accomplishment. We have a master mechanic. We had 3 master mechanics, but and then there's other guys that we have three guys who are B mechanics who do brakes, oil, shocks and stuff. And we sat down with them and they said, more work? Can we stay open late? Can we work Saturdays for extra money? Can we do weekends? I mean, there's, which, making the guys work more and increasing their workload wasn't something we were expecting to hear.
Right.
And they're so excited about it. They're like, thank you so much. Like, we love the extra work. They want to, weekends, they don't want to lay around. They want to work. So, just that is a small change. Like Sarah said, but people are excited to come here because they know that they're coming here to work for their goals. And it just increases tech efficiency. It increases overall vibes. It increases how hard they're working, how thorough they're doing their inspections, because they feel bought in now.
Were there any goals that you heard that you couldn't deliver?
Not really. We've for the 401k thing, figuring out healthcare has been a little tough. It's really expensive in the Valley, so it's something we're still going for. At the end of the day,
so a couple employees said, "I'd like health insurance."
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and you're finding that that's going to be difficult to deliver on.
Yeah, we'll absolutely do it. I think it's just prioritizing on what to do first.
We have a list of all the improvements we'd like to make and a dollar figure next to all of them, and so it's just a matter of rank ordering and prioritizing. One of the mechanics this morning was just making a joke about health. Like, they don't expect it because it hasn't been here for 48 years. So it doesn't necessarily, they're not expecting it to happen tomorrow, but there's a very clear open communication line of like, we are working hard and it's up to us as a team to improve the business together in order to, pay you guys more, offer more benefits, give more time off to some people, or work more. Like, this is very much a team problem.
Like, all this organized little things we changed a lot. And then, a massive change was everybody has more responsibility now, and their roles have changed a bit. So there's a lot of kind of big changes that weren't that big that kind of got us to the operational standard we wanted to. I think the changes we're talking about are those kind of bigger growth changes. And, how do we take this from a really, great business that's just doing, flatlining at max efficiency, and then adding revenue streams to it? How do we really free up time for our guys so they aren't leaving at 6, 7 at night every night because they have to catch up on writing estimates? So there's a lot of big changes that we need to be up in the office to kind of do and shepherd. But when we're down there, we love being down there because we know half the people who walk in, we're helping the guys, are really involved. But I think I alluded to it, but we just hired somebody who's starting in 2 weeks. He was kind of going to fill that extra role, that extra body down there, and give us a lot more freedom.
Yeah, what we're going through in 2 weeks is a step function change to the way that the business operates, the way, a key flows or a car flows through the system. So this is the first like real change that's not just like little tweaks that add up and whatnot that we've spoken about. This is like, all right, we're doing an overhaul of the system.
Yeah, I think I'm, so far it's only been 6 months, and I think it's this percentage has gone up quite a lot. I mean, we're already almost 14% ahead of our revenue target, and much higher on the EBITDA SDE target. But that's going from 14%. I think we can bring that number up to 40, 50% by implementing these big changes. So we've done a lot of small things, and now it's kind of time to really work on the business rather than in the business. I think one thing that we were really going to not do at the beginning, one of the reasons I was going to keep my job, is we didn't want to bake ourselves into being essential for the business. We saw the old operator, and he couldn't leave the business. If he was sick, the business would fall apart. We didn't want that to be what happened to us. It's kind of what happened to us a little bit, but now we've gotten to a point where we could step away and this place will run really great without us, which will then allow us to go off and buy other companies. So one thing we're a little nervous about is we're the first ones here, the last ones to leave every day. And if that starts to happen less, are we going to lose respect? But I think that by really putting in the work for 6 months, the guys have realized that we are going to care about them no matter what. And the way we're going to kind of frame it is, if we step away and buy another business, it allows us to take more money from that business or split that burden for our own living, and allow us to keep more money in each individual business. It kind of gives them a bit more responsibility, more upward mobility. Somebody's eventually going to be the president of the shop. Right now we're co-presidents. So I think we're both really, really glad that we baked ourselves fully into the business for the first 6 months, but now we're kind of starting that unwinding process. We'll never be fully hands off, but we need to have a bit of flexibility to get back to the holding company focus, get back to working on the business and maximizing each of our assets.
Some rapid fire questions for you guys. So does everybody know already that you plan on building a Holdco?
Yeah.
And was that something that you told them later, or was that something you were always forward with?
We treaded it lightly.
Yeah.
We really wanted to buy this business because we're locals and we knew that we wanted to preserve local business. And so the reason that we are here is to preserve local business. And to the extent of which, and we intend to build a holding company of this many companies and whatnot, that was what we treaded lightly. But everyone knew our motivations for buying the business from day one.
Yeah. And the three people we've hired during the interview process, we've talked about it, not as a, hey, by the way, we're going to go off and do this. It's a, hey, we're going to go do this and you're going to be part of it. If we have somebody who's a wonderful operator here, eventually they might be a GM for 3-4 businesses around town. So going forward, we're much more open, but we didn't come in and say, hey, this is number one of many of our holding company. Because it really wasn't. It was one of one. And we really are here to make this business wonderful before we move and grow.
What are you paying yourselves?
We each pay ourselves, we're actually the lowest paid of the shop. We each pay ourselves $80K in salary. We own 70% of the business. So once we start giving distributions, that upside will be much, much higher. We're looking at getting closer to 750, 850 in SDE after the first year. Most of that year one is going back into the business, buying a loaner car fleet and stuff. But yeah, right now we're 80K. But then distributions is where we're hoping to really make the upside.
Mm-hmm. And so can you say again where the business is now in terms of revenue and SDE and where you think you'll get it by the end of the year, just to net us out?
Yeah, I think we're still figuring that out because of the seasonality of Aspen. Like I said, we experienced, the normal winter slump, but now that we're in April, May are some of the busiest months of the year and we're just blasting through revenue goals. We're kind of readjusting what are our expectations and whatnot. I think we're on track to do closer to 3.1 million in this first year. So increasing revenue by 500K-ish. And yeah, our debt service, we definitely took on some debt at a high interest rate period. We're already seeing it has gone down since we bought the business because we're on a variable quarterly SBA 7A loan. So after debt service, I think we're hoping to distribute at least 350 to 400K. But again, that's all speculative. It honestly could be more than that, but I don't want to overpromise, especially if an investor is listening. Have not shared any. We have shared the success. We have shared with our investors that it's doing well, and we'd like to. Obviously, we had to go to our shareholders to vote that we could increase our salaries and bring Matthew on full time and whatnot. We said it's doing very well, and we know that it's doing very well. We just haven't put numbers to it, mostly because it's so variable monthly right now.
Yeah. And I think, we're only 6 months in. We have a model that basically points to at the end of the year where we expect our bank account to be. And it is much higher than we were expecting, especially after we pay about $220 of debt service per year.
220,000.
220,000. Exactly.
We figured.
Yeah. So it's going to be much higher. We don't want to overpromise, but if we're adding 500, 600,000 of revenue, we're not adding that many big costs. Obviously, me coming in full time is another 80K salary, but if it's allowing us to do an extra 600K, it really bumps up that SDE. I also think year one SDE is going to be a bit lower because we have put so much back into the business, renovating, making the place look better. We've invested in extra parking. We've done a lot putting it back into the business. But I think steady state will be much, much higher than the 500K we were initially planning for going forward.
Fantastic, guys. And circling way back up now to the terms of the deal. So it was a 90. What was the breakdown of the acquisition price again, please? Yeah.
So it was a 20% down payment, but on a 1.5x step up. So 20% down payment, 80% levered, but we own 70% because of that step up.
Great. And for the investors, it's great. You give us $100,000, you immediately have $150,000 of equity. And we're promising, I don't want to actually promise anything, but, we're tracking, we originally promised, 12, 13% year over year returns, and we're tracking to almost 3-4x that. Obviously, we want to promise anything, especially year one, because we want to buy back into the business. But from the investor standpoint, it was kind of a no-brainer. They got a local business that's been profitable for 49 years. They're immediately getting a 50% increase on their equity and cash flowing year one. So, that's
excellent.
And then we also had 10% seller financing. No, we needed that, especially per Matthias. We didn't have background in auto shops, so having the owner bought in really helped us with the banks. We're going to pay him off pretty quick, but just having him on, holding paper from him really accelerated.
So the SBA loan was 70%. He was 10%, and you guys were you and your investors were 20.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say just one really quick thing that was a huge unlock for us. We had a big chicken and egg situation where we couldn't really get the loan or the seller to agree to us buying because we didn't have the money in the bank, but we needed to have the deal on the hook to get the money in the bank. And that really went back and forth for like 3-4 months. He didn't really believe that we had the capability of raising $350,000. So what we did is we kind of almost chat GPT'd, or we found some non-binding investment agreement, and we sent that out, and we raised $350,000 in like 24 hours on paper to show that we could. And once we had that, then both the bank and the sellers allowed us to sign the purchase agreement and move forward. So one thing, if people don't have their own capital to really put in right away, coming up with some sort of non-binding investment agreement just to show that you can back yourself was an unlock for us.
What a great tip. I have never heard that. That I should have teased that out of you much earlier in the interview. That's a great tip. Certainty to close is how every broker and savvy seller will perceive you on the other side of the table. And of course, searchers generally are seen as less likely to be able to close than competing buyers. So to the extent that you can really fortify your own image is very powerful, and as you just said in your case, was necessary to get the deal done. Great tip. ChatGPT to the rescue. Let's close just hearing about the partnership, doing this, the two of you together versus not. I mean, there may not be much to say because you basically decided on being partners before you decided on anything else. But what might you say for searchers out there listening about your relationship?
Yeah, I mean, business ownership is a marriage, and you go through hard things in marriages and all of the things. And like when we had that fetal position moment, it was so real and visceral, and we had personal guarantees on this, and it was kind of like, what did we do? And we had super frank conversations. I mean, like we said, Matthew still had another job, and so it was, I was the one that was here, like. And it was by design, and maybe in hindsight, we definitely underestimated the workload and whatnot, but just the ability to have frank conversations, I think, in life is really important, and especially in business ownership, because there's no way to skirt around it, right? And it becomes obvious, and tensions grow and all of those things, especially in challenging times.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I give huge props to Sarah. She really things were tough, she'd bring it up and be very blunt with me. I think, knowing each other our whole lives, I think we know we're going to care about each other no matter what. But the business is the business, and we have to be blunt with what we're feeling. And I always wanted to give 100% to what we're doing here, but you can't really give 100% to two things. And even if I wasn't going, full blast at the other job, it was taking a lot of time away from what I was doing here. And she kind of came to me after that and said, I could be doing this on my own, right? Probably didn't want to do it on her own, but absolutely could. And it made me look at what I wanted to do, what made me happy. And I could work from 7 a.m. until 12 here, and it's still energizing because we're kind of building towards something. Whereas if I was working after hours, elsewhere working weekends, it was draining. So I just kind of decided to make that change. And I think having a business partner it's incredible if you find the right person. There's a lot of scary moments. There's a lot of happy moments to celebrate. It's great to celebrate with someone or go through the trenches with someone rather than by yourself. I think we also, part of the reason we became business partners is because of that list. We kind of realized our inherent curiosity. I mean, Sarah is always listening to podcasts, always listening to books, always coming to the table with new ideas. And I just kind of know if something goes wrong, she's going to figure it out, and I think, and I hope it kind
and
of
likewise
goes both ways. I think we just kind of know, we got each other's backs, and we're very like-minded in a lot of ways, but there's also some, I think Sarah's very good at being rational and looking at things and looking at models and understanding the reality of situations. Sometimes I get a little carried away and I come up with these big ideas, and then she makes it work. She also has huge ideas too, but I think that we just complement each other really well. And feel.
Yeah, and we didn't necessarily, we had overlapping backgrounds and work experience and whatnot. And so going into it, we didn't know what each other's strengths were. And you find out very quickly in business ownership what each other's strengths are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or like a Jobs Wozniak, where one was clearly the salesperson, one was the engineer. We were kind of both the same, but then have over time differentiated.
Mm-hmm. Anything that we didn't get to, Sarah and Matthew, that you want to make sure to mention?
I don't think so. This was such a wild ride to relive everything and go through it. And I think our conviction on ETA is just as high. I mean, it's definitely been challenging. It's definitely been more than we expected, but you come out on the other side like, all right, let's do it again. And we're actually about to submit another LOI in another hour. We have a deadline. So
oh, wow.
Round 2, here we come.
Oh, how fun.
I'd say also, I mean, buying a business has been 7,000 times harder and more exhausting and more involved than I was expecting. But it was twofold that more rewarding. I went to Dartmouth, and everybody thinks that, you have to have this like crazy high job at Morgan Stanley or Google or something. And when you separate out, like I would so much rather work at a small business where I know I'm helping people in my community every day. The people that we love that work for us are taking their paychecks and feeding their families with it. It has been so rewarding, and truly feel like it's the right path. And if anybody even has an inkling of wanting to do it, just know it's going to be hard, but know it's worth every minute. I'd say the other one or two things real quick are, because of this kind of talking about that community, we have, just with some friends, we have a bunch of friends who have kind of seen what we've done and want to do it too. We started a Slack community, where we all share deals. We ask each other questions. It's filled with operators, investors. A lot of people are just curious, active searchers. So I guess we can send you a link to put in your bio. We have a little form on our website to join it. We have about 60 people in it right now, active Slack chat. And then we're trying to start up bi-weekly meetings, eventually in-person meetings too. But we've learned so much from other people who've done this that we want to kind of centralize that. And then the last thing is just thanking you again. I mean, whether it was the buying process, the purchase process, the ideation process, the field position process, your really helped a lot. And
I don't know what we would have done without it, right? Like if you face a fetal position moment and you don't know that others go through this too, it can be awfully daunting. So yeah.
We literally, like when we first bought it, like the first week, we're like, I wonder what our acquired minds will be. As a joke, they gave me it a few years about
How fun. Well, congratulations to you guys. I love the vision. It really got my gears turning after we had our pre-call, as I told you. I just think that there's something to what you're building in the kind of the next iteration of a Chenmark or a Chase Murdoch is who you mentioned in Utah, Sarah, of Dakota. There's this interesting Holdco vision taking shape around permanent equity and deep local small businesses. And so, and you guys left very promising careers to go home and pursue that. So there's just so much to enjoy about your story. And then of course, the performance of business acquisition number one is always, that alone is really exciting. Mm-hmm. So thank you guys for sharing. Thank you for being so transparent. And we'll put links to everything. Send me that Slack link. We'll put that, but we'll also put your LinkedIn. And what's the name of the auto shop?
Aspen Total Automotive.
We're about to release some merch, so if you want to hack, check back in like 3 weeks.
Okay, so this will be airing on the other side of 3 weeks. So make sure I get the link. Well, we'll get the link to that.
I think, and then last thing, I mean, we got so much value out of reaching out to people on this podcast. If anybody wants to, you can email us, LinkedIn us, Instagram us, whatever. We're open to chat.
Great. Beautiful offer. Thank you for that. Sarah Chiles, Matthew Ferguson, congratulations and thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Phil. Appreciate it.
Hope you enjoyed that interview. Don't forget to subscribe to the Acquiring Minds newsletter. We send an email for every episode with an introduction to the interview, a link to the video version on YouTube, and soon, key takeaways, numbers, and more essentials from the interview for those of you who don't have time to listen or watch it. Subscribe at acquiringminds.co. You'll also find all our webinars there on the website, both those we have coming up and recordings of past webinars. At this point, there are over 30 webinar recordings, a wealth of information on all the technical nitty-gritty of buying a business. acquiringminds.co.